Thank you, Brian, for that great roads session. What I'm going to be covering today is RhoSync 2.0, which is a complete rewrite of the RhoSync 1.x system. It is now a synchronization framework as opposed to a Rails application, and we use a different storage engine for storing the synchronized data. In this case, we're using Redis as a storage engine. So those of you who are familiar with some key value stores like Cassandra or there's Redis and there's Memcache, there's Tokyo Cabinet, several other key value stores. We're using Redis in this case. So I'm going to build based on the stores application that Brian started here. What I'm going to do in RhoSync 2.0, we actually create a application, or separate server application, which will correspond to our client application. So I'm going to go ahead and generate that. And we just run the same command that we would to generate a client app. In this case, I'll call it store-server. Now, this will generate several files. You'll see a rackup file, a couple of settings files, a default license key. By default, we generate a license key for your RhoSync application that supports up to 10 devices. There's an application file, which is where we're going to put in our authentication code, rake file, and spec helper. This is going to be how we're going to it's going to help us with testing our source adapters. So what I'm going to do and a little note here, this settings file, if you're familiar with Rails development, you'll see that it has 3 different environments for running the application. We can set the environment when we start up the server, so that way you can have a separate Redis environment, for example, in development, test, and production mode. By default, they all point to the same Redis instance. So that's the settings file. So if, without writing any code first, I just want to make sure my store server starts up. And if you do rake-t, you'll see all the different rake tasks that we provide to manage your RhoSync application. In this case, I want to just start it up. First, I want to start Redis. So it's actually telling me I don't have Redis installed here. Let's do. Oh, it's actually running already on Brian's machine, so I can just start up the server. Again. There we go. So you'll see this this message printing out. This shows me I'm running RhoSync 2.0.0 beta 5. And when we generate the application, we use the default session secret, which is a way to encode your session between the browser and the client and the server. By default, it's just set to change me, so that's why we put a message in here. When you run your application in production mode, you'll want to change that. So I can use, since I'm using detach here, I just press Control / to detach from my server console. It's still running, and I want to open it up here in a browser. Now, the RhoSync 2.0 browser web console is a little simpler than the 1.x one, if you're familiar with that. It just has a link here for the console, and the way that it works is it will actually make HTTP calls to the RhoSync server using the RhoSync API. And if you've gone through the RhoSync 2.0 page, you'll see that we talk about the RhoSync API. There's a section on it here. Let's see if I can find it. The RhoSync API provides all these different methods for managing the RhoSync application. You can do things like getting license information, resetting the server, pushing objects into RhoSync and deleting objects that are stored in RhoSync, listing the users, all these different methods. So all of these functions here you see are available through the API, and these are all of the functions that are used by the console itself. And so you see when I log in, it shows I have my license here, which is available 9 out of 10 devices. So I can just reset that, and it shows I have 10 out of 10 devices. And there's more information on this on the wiki. So what I'm going to do now is I want to walk through generating a source adapter that corresponds to the product model that we created on our roads application. And I'm going to show how to set up the query for that source adapter, and then at the very end, we'll tie that into our store application and show the synchronized data coming down to our store application. So I'll use the RhoSync source generator to generate it. What this is going to do is it's going to generate the product adapter itself and then also a spec. We use RSpec for the RhoSync testing framework. So that way you can write RSpec examples, and that will help you more rapidly develop your product adapter. In this case, I'm going to edit my product spec. And if you're following along here on the training page, I'm basically going through the steps in this section called synchronized data to backend. So I'm going to implement the query method first. You'll see it's marked pending by default. I'll just remove that and then call the test create function. This is to make sure that my product data source actually has a product to query. So I'll create it first, and then I'm just going to check that I have more than one product. Very simple test. So I'll go ahead and run that. And to run my test, I just do the rate RhoSync spec command. So you'll see this is failing because it's actually failing for a different reason. Let's see. Oh, right. So I have this product variable here. I better create it first. So I'll do I'm going to create a hash of hashes. In this case, I'm going to contain one product and it's going to have a name. Let's call it iPhone. It's going to have a brand, which is Apple. It's going to have a price. Let's go $199. So now what's going to happen is when I execute this test, it's going to call my test create helper, and it's going to create this record in the row store. And when I do a query, I should get at least one back. Okay. Great. So now we can see it's failing because I expected more than 0 records back. I actually got 0. Now why is that? Because I haven't actually implemented my query method yet. So let's go ahead and implement the query method. And to implement the query method in RhoSync is very simple. We just have to populate an @result hash. To start with, I'm going to initialize it. And in this example, I'm going to use the REST client gem, which is a very useful gem for doing anything over HTTP, particularly REST services. So I'm going to require it there. And going to create a parsed variable, and I'm just going to parse the result of my so go ahead and let's go ahead and implement the query method. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the REST client gem to query my products. And if you're familiar with the tutorial, this is very similar to that tutorial that we had for 1.x of RhoSync. So I'm just going to iterate over each record that I get from the products JSON here. And I'm going to set my @result key to be the item, and the item has a product element, and each product has an ID. So this is how I'm going to set the ID for each of my objects. And so we're going to set this to the item itself. Now this is not required, but I like to put this in my source adapter just to explicitly show that I'm returning this @result variable. But actually what RhoSync will do is if a result is defined in your source adapter, it will use that. Okay. So now I'll go ahead and try running this again. And it passed. So this means that I actually got back some data from this row store, and the size of that data was greater than 1. We could do some other things here just to make sure. I want to verify that I did return something, and I don't trust my tests. So let's see what we actually return. So let's see what my result looks like. The idea here is I can just use this rate command, this rspec command, to run my source adapter. I don't have to have any other piece installed. So it gets very rapid development. So here you can see this is the hash that I'm actually returning, and this data will get stored in the RhoSync storage engine and will get synchronized to the device. So just for completeness, I'm going to add a create and a delete method. So let's go ahead and implement create. Now create is very simple because in this example we're going to be receiving a hash of the data. The hash of the data that's coming from the client is going to contain those attributes that Brian described earlier, which are name, brand, quantity, and price. So I can just take that hash and post it directly to my server. And in some cases you might have to do some processing of the data before you post it up. But here I can just go ahead and post it. And the nice thing about this REST client is I can specify my arguments in a hash form. So in this case, it's going to be create hash. And one thing I need to note here about create, the way that create works on the client is the object is created locally on the device, and when you create a record on the device, RhoDs will provide a temporary object ID. And that temporary object ID is used on the device so it can reference it, and you can actually edit the record on the device before posting it up to the RhoSync application. So what's important here is when that record gets created in our rhostore.heroku.com, we need to establish what we call a link between the record that we created on the RhoStore and the record that we created on the device. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually make a call to the RhoStore and pull down the new object ID that we just created. So that's why, and you'll see here, I save the result in this result variable, and I'm going to make a GET request to my RhoStore to get that ID. Now this is not required, by the way. If your web service does not have a way to get the ID easily, and when you create a record, what will happen is the record will get replaced on the client on the device, so you won't see it. It will not be editable before it gets the updated record from the server. Actually, I'm going to get the result comes from my result here, so and what I get in the result here is another JSON hash, so I can parse that and pull out the ID. Okay. So what you see here is I'm returning the ID to the newly created record. This will allow RhoSync to send a link to the device and tell it you created temp object 1 that on the in the RhoStore that is now object 500. And I want to write the test for this, so what I'm going to do now is and all of these test helpers, test create, test query, test delete, and test update are all on the RhoSync 2.0 wiki page. I want to make sure that it's not nil. And I'm going to check to make sure that I didn't get any errors when I created this record. And the final thing I'm going to check is when you create a record, RhoSync will actually add this record to the master copy of the data. We call this the master document. So creating this record in the RhoSync application should result in it existing in the master copy of the document. And I want to try creating a different object here. Let's create the HTC Evo.